Well, in Europe, we take a lot for granted in terms of the recovery of the southern European economies. The internal devaluation that we talk about, or that the Europeans like to talk about, requires a lot more deflation than these economies have had. And while we think of deflation as a bad thing, the only way the cost structure in places like Greece and Italy is going to get into line is through a process of deflation that lowers their wages. But you know, in a lot of places where I see risks, I also see opportunities. Let's talk about Mr. Putin. The most rational response for the Europeans, I wrote this yesterday at Fox, would be not across-the-board sanctions because of all the interconnections and all the web of connections that would come apart and all that business, but rather would be to finally start to develop their own shale gas and to reawaken their nuclear programs and so forth, so that they gradually not only take away the threat of the Russians turning off the gas, but what we fail to recognize is that Russia has no place else to sell that gas. They're flaring 8 times as much gas as the next largest major oil producer, because they don't have markets. They get 75% of their export revenues from oil and gas, and Moscow gets 50% of its government revenues. Gradually, if the Europeans start to replace that gas, they do a lot to scale down the threat that the Russians pose. But it's a matter of them recognizing and being willing to no longer outsource environmental risks to Russia, take them on themselves and manage them, so that they relieve themselves of this. So there's an opportunity there. In the United States, you know, it's almost become an annual rite of spring. The Chicago Cubs this year will go to the World Series, and America will have a breakout year of growth. In reality, there's a lot of things we've been doing to prop up 2.3% growth, which is not great, and it replicates what happened in the Bush years as well as the Obama years, by doing things like getting young people to come to my university and study art history, museum studies, social work, and political analysis. And the economic report of the president optimistically states that all these people who've been preparing for more productive careers are going to rush out into the labor force and cause the economy to grow at much better than 3% over the next 3 or 4 years. I see a much greater risk is that there still isn't any demand for what they do, and the debt they have will keep them from getting into the housing market in the way that we need them to get into it. The way you described at our breakfast, we've had all these speculators and investors. 30% of the housing recovery has been them. Now they have to be replaced. And there's this sort of broad assumption that the household formation is going to generate a lot of demand for new housing. And I don't know that that's necessarily going to happen. I don't see the risks in China everybody else sees. Why? They have a lot of debt. They're also sitting on $3 or $4 trillion worth of hard currency reserves. They can literally just forgive it all in a way that no one else can, and they are likely to do some of that simply to keep their economy growing. So I see the real risks in the places where we think we're going to get the strong growth, and I also see some opportunities.